Hey everyone, so in this lesson we're going to go over something called the outlier test. Alright, so if you haven't already done so, there is a worksheet that goes along with this video. It's on Google Classroom if you want to print it. And also you definitely want to have your calculator out during this video. Okay, so first of all, what is an outlier? Alright, an outlier is defined as an extremely high or extremely low value when compared with the rest of the values in a data set. Okay, so you see here it says outliers can greatly affect measures of center for a given data set. For this reason, they are sometimes excluded from calculations. Okay, so I always think about this in terms of test scores. So let's say a really good student typically always scores 95 and above on every test. And then maybe they have a really bad day, or maybe they fill out a Scantron wrong and they get a 60 on a test. So that 60 is an outlier, all right, because it's way below the other test scores. So what it's going to do is it's going to take that student's average and drag it down. Okay? So, how do you know if you have an outlier or not? Well, that's where we take into account something called the outlier test. All right, so there's two things you have to look for in an outlier test. All right, and we use the following two formulas. All right, we're going to test something called the upper bound. So we're looking for numbers greater than the following. So this is quartile 3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range. All right, so hopefully you remember from the last lesson we went over quartiles. All right, then we also have to test something called the lower bound. So we're looking for numbers less than quartile 1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range. All right, so let's take a look at an example. So number 1 says, students taking a makeup test received the following test scores. Does this data set contain an outlier? Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our data into the calculator. So hopefully you remember how to do that from the last lesson. All right, so I'm going to go to my stat button. I'm going to go to option 1 where it says edit. And I need to clear my list. So I'm going to scroll up so that L1 is highlighted, hit clear, enter. Okay, so now I'm going to type in my data. So we got 88, 79, 94, 90, 45, 71, 82, and 88. All right, so real quick, I'm just going to make sure that I typed all that in correctly. So we got 88, 79, 94, 90, 45, 71, 82, 88. Okay, so I'm going to go to Stat, and now I'm going to scroll over to where it says Calculate. And I'm going to go to option 1 var stats. Scroll down to calculate, hit enter. Okay, so in order to perform the outlier test, I need to know the values for Q1 and Q3, the first quartile and the third. So Q1 is 75, Q3 is 89. So we said Q1 was 75 and Q3 was 89. All right, and then hopefully you remember the IQR, the interquartile range, is Q3 minus Q1. All right, so in this case, that's going to be 89 minus 75, which works out to be 14. Okay, so that's the information we need. So now we're going to look at those two formulas. So first we're going to look for values below Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, so Q1 is 75 minus 1.5, and my IQR is 14. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my calculator. All right, so I'm just going to quit this screen for a second, and I'm going to type that in. 75 minus 1.5 times 14. Okay, so we get 54. Okay, so now we want to go through our data values and see, are there any values below 54? Yes, there are. Okay, so 45 is a number that's below 54. So 45 is going to be considered an outlier. Okay, now we still got to test the upper bound. Okay, so we still have to look for values. I'm just going to write it below because I'm running out of room. Above Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, so Q3 we got from the calculator. We said that was 89 plus 1.5 times 14. All right, so again, I'm just going to go back to my calculator, plug that in. 89 plus 1.5 times 14 is 110. Okay, so now we're looking for values above 110. So I don't have any scores above 110. So 45 is my only outlier. Okay, so that's what you do to perform the outlier test. You find quartile 1, quartile 3, which you get from the calculator, the interquartile range, which is Q3 minus Q1, and then you plug it into those two formulas. Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. Look for any values below that number. Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. Look for any values above that number. All right, so now in part B, it says find the mean and median of the data set with and without the outlier. Okay, so first I'm going to look at the mean and median with the outlier. All right, so I already have my list typed in, so I'm just going to go back to Stat, scroll over to Calculate, and go back to 1var stats. Okay, so my mean, that's the X with the little bar over it, is 79.625. And the median, if I scroll down, my median is 85. Okay, now we're going to look at it without the outlier. Oops. Okay, so now to find those calculations without the outlier, we're just going to delete the outlier from the list. So I'm going to go back to Stat, go to Edit, and 45 was our outlier. So I'm going to scroll down to 45, and then I'm going to hit the delete button. So now it's deleted from my list. So now I want to run those stats again. So I'm going to go back to Stat, scroll over to Calculate, 1var stats, and now we're calculating those same statistics but without the outlier. So now my mean is approximately 84.571 and my median is 88. Okay, so in this example, we were talking about students taking a makeup test. All right, so if you take away that outlier, you'll see the average goes from a 79.6 to an 84.6. Okay, so removing the outlier does make a difference. All right. All right, we're going to skip over number 2 because I think that's an example you guys can try on your own. And we'll quickly take a look at number 3. Okay, so number 3 says find the mean and median for the data set listed below and then identify outliers if any. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my calculator and I'm going to type in my stats. So stat edit, we're going to clear what we have in this list. And I'm going to type in my new data entries. Okay, so we got 210, 45, 10, 108, 452, 225, 35, 95, 140, 25, 65, and 250. Okay, just going to take a second, make sure I typed them in correctly. And I did. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Stat, scroll over to Calculate, 1var stats, scroll down to Calculate, hit Enter. All right, so it looks like our mean is 138.3 repeating, and our median is 101.5. Okay, so the mean we said was 138.3 repeating, and our median was 101.5. All right, then they said identify outliers if any. So to perform the outlier test, we're going to need Q1 and Q3. Okay, so Q1 according to the calculator is 40 and Q3 is 217.5.